All right, well, welcome to part number 4. This is where a lot of the meat is going to be at. So this video might be a little bit longer. However, it's going to be so vital in allowing you to level up your skills and really start to see how the beauty of the back end and front end and connecting them with a database allows your app to shine and you to grow as a developer. So I have a couple items I want to touch on before we get started coding, but this will be a doozy of a video, so strap in. All right, so I first want to circle back to our MongoDB page. So go ahead, log back into MongoDB if you logged out, and we're gonna go to your cluster. It should have had a name. I called mine Journal App. Inside there, you're going to want to browse collections. You're going to want to create a database if one hasn't already been created for you. And the reason for that, we can see I've got a couple of entries here. The reason for that is when you connect to it, we want to actually add another item right before this question mark that specifically connects to your cluster and your specified database. So we saw mine was called my first database. So in your server, you're going to want to connect that right here. I'm going to call it my first database. Okay. I'm actually going to create a new one, but I just wanted to show you that that's what we do. And this is kind of the step for creating a database. So I'll call it my second database. And the collection name, I don't know, it should be the same thing. And I know database is not capitalized, my bad. Here we go. So we'll create, and this is what's going to happen. We can now see my second database, and we'll go ahead and actually connect our stuff here. So it'll be my second database. Boom. Okay, so now in our server.js file, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a few different code bits for our connection events. And this is a good practice to get into because you're going to want statuses printed out for you on your own projects, and you're also going to want these printed out on projects that you're going to do with companies you might work for. So this is always a good practice, but I'm actually going to copy and paste from my other project here. We're going to do a few different connection ons. So when we connect to the database and it's the type of connected, it will print Mongoose connected to the server. If we get a type of error, it'll print Mongoose connection error and then the error associated with it. And then on disconnect, it'll say Mongoose disconnected. Now these are important because as developers, we want to make sure we are aware of what the server is doing. And the more information we have and the way we word stuff, it allows us to have an easier time dealing with any errors or issues that pop up. So next, I'm going to grab this other bit of code. And again, if you needed to take some time to pause the video and write all this, I would highly recommend that. I'm moving on. So we're going to capture app termination and restart events. So if anything weird happens with your server, like if you decide to deploy this, make it live on the internet, again, I highly recommend you add some security measures like a username and password to just log in before seeing any of this information. I personally have mine just on my local home network, and I actually discuss how I do that in the video Dockerizing your React app. But I have these events here because sometimes stuff will happen, and again, the more information you can give yourself as a developer, the easier time you'll have identifying why things go wrong. So we've got just this graceful shutdown that closes the Mongoose connection. And what I want to do, just so we can start to see something, we're going to go ahead and in our GET request, we're going to go and we're going to make something happen in our MongoDB. Typically what I'm about to do is going to happen in a POST request, because you're going to send information from the client to the server in the form of a post. So you're posting it to the database. Regardless, this is just so we can make sure everything's connected and working. So we're going to do mongoose.connect, and we're going to put our DB URI there. And again, our DB URI is this URL up here. We're going to chain a then method. Then we're going to have a arrow function, and we're going to do journal.create. And this is where we're now going to just, for our database, create a journal entry. And it can, it's going to be in the form of an object. So it's going to have title, which again, our title is in the form of a string. So we're going to call it test, or it's in the form of an array. My apologies. Is it in the form of an array or a string? It's in the form of a string. There we go. It might actually be better to flip those two. We'll have title, tags, body, created. So title is just a string. We'll have tags. That's an array of strings. So we'll do test1, comma, test2. Body is going to be, I'm just going to spam the keyboard just to get it out there. And then created, if we don't insert a date, it's going to default to just date.now. So we're just going to leave it empty. Now, after we do that, we're going to add a comma. And this is where we're going to do some error catching. So we're going to do function error. And we're going to do if then res.send status 400 with a comma, and our message is going to equal the error. And then we're going to return. Otherwise, we'll res.send status of 200. And our message is going to equal success. And then what we're going to do after that is our graceful shutdown. We're going to have that do finish, create, call, and our function is going to equal null, our callback. Right, and just so we can see that, our graceful shutdown, it takes a message and a callback. The callback's already equal to null, so we technically don't need to add it there, but we're just going to do it anyways. And we can actually get rid of this res.send on line 73. So let's save this. And again, if you're just starting fresh today, make sure in the right-hand side you do npm run start to build the React app. And then in the left-hand side, you want npm run dev start to run our node-mon server.js. We did that in the last video. So we're going to go now to our project. I'm just going to hit refresh, make sure we're all good. And since we have our test button here, we'll bring up the console log and we'll hit test. Look at that. After a short delay, we see status 200 message was successful. And so now if we go back to our database. Where did I put that? Oh, I actually think I accidentally closed the connection. That's okay. We can go here to my clusters, browse my collections, go to my second database, loading documents. We can see here it didn't have any entries in that one, but I believe in our journals, yeah, there we go. So that's interesting. So maybe, I don't know. We have our title of test, our tags, which is test1, test2, the spamming of the keyboard, and our created section there. I think maybe what happened is in this string up here, we might not have needed to rename it. That's okay. You live and you learn, right? I'm always still learning as a developer, so you guys just saw that in real time. But this is exciting. Congratulations. This is huge. We have officially created our first journal entry, and this is what we're going to use now to tie in to these tiles here, okay? But before we do that, let's do a little bit more work on the server side. Okay, so I identified why we had some weird stuff going on here, okay? So you remember when I clicked create database, we had entered the database name and the collection name. So I think what happened there is my second database got created as a collection, and journals was created, I believe, from our Mongoose model, which I actually need to cut and paste that up here. Regardless, I think that's what happened. I'm not going to spend too much time figuring that out. You're more than welcome to, and I highly recommend it. But for now, we are going to, like I said, paste that all the way up here. And then we need to get started on our home.js with our journal entry squares. So we'll hop into that here. All right, so we're now here in our home.js. We're going to get rid of all these journal squares except for one. Hit save, make sure that change reflected. Awesome. We're also going to get rid of the test button. However, don't get rid of this handle click. We're going to leverage that here in just a little bit. We're actually going to rename it to fetch data. Okay, and we're kind of just going to leave that alone for a little bit because I want to do just a couple other things before we get into it. We're going to hop back into our server.js and we're going to make sure this fetch retrieves information for us. So we're going to rename it to get-journals, and it's going to remain a app.get. And we're going to delete these. We'll have this just be an empty object. Okay, we're going to do some formatting to make it look pretty. We're going to do journal.find. And we're going to have a variable called journals. And then we're going to return journals here. Gosh, that's a little bit hard to get my head around there. All right, so what's happening here? We are calling an API that's called getJournals. We're connecting to the MongoDB database. Then we're running a command called journal.find. And since we have an empty object, it's just going to return all of the journals that are in our database. If there's an error, we're going to send the error message. And if it's success, we're going to send the 200, the message success, and then we're going to send the journals that are going to be returned as part of this function. So that's why we have that name here. Let's see if that works. We'll actually rename this and we'll call it finish get call. Now we'll go home. We need to do a little bit of work here before we can officially test this function. You remember in a couple of videos ago, we made our store context. This is where that's going to finally start coming into place. We need to do a couple things. We need to, on the load of the home page, create a fetch call. With that call, we need to then set a variable to say, hey, this has been called. If that variable is set and we navigate back to this page from a different page, like let's say we boot up our website, go to the home page, then go to create, and then go back to home. If nothing in the store has changed, we don't want to recreate another call to the database. Because what you'll notice is in your MongoDB client, in the database tab here, there's these things called read, write, in, out. When you are not working on a free cluster, time is money. That is why in our code base, when we connect to MongoDB, once we get either an error or a resolution, we shut it down. We shut down that connection. And again, that's with Mongoose connection close. That is a big practice I learned the hard way as a developer. You don't want to just open a connection and then do whatever you want and then wait for the project to close or shut down. Because again, time is money. Some websites will charge you just for time being connected. That's a little bit more rare these days, like AWS and Google Cloud and Azure. I don't think does that anymore. But either way, you don't want to leave your connection to your database open. It's a security thing, and it could also be a money thing. So now that we've got that, let's go to our home page. We need to do a few different things. We'll leave the fetch data there. We're going to create a use effect. And in the use effect, we're going to have an arrow function that's going to say if a certain variable, then fetch data. Okay. We also want to add an empty array there to make sure it's only called once on load. So what do we want this variable to be? Well, in our store context, we created is store updated. Let's go ahead and do some deconstructing in our app. And I think we can do most of it. Let's just copy this whole object here. Oops. We go from object to object. Again, working smarter, not harder as a developer. So we'll do const that whole object equals use store. Boom. And again, you saw me just hit enter there. And VS Code, you gotta love it. It just auto-filled it for me right there. We're going to get rid of our search state and set search state. And now, if is store updated, if it's true, we're going to fetch data, and then we're going to set is store updated to false. So now we have, how this works, right, is we have a store context that is actually wrapping our entire application. So we can think of this store context as the state of our entire application. Some companies will use things like Redux. I hate it. I think now with this use context, there's not a good enough reason to use Redux anymore. It's basically the same thing, and if you're coming on as a junior or mid-level dev, you really don't need to worry much about creating any Redux functionality. It should be there already for you. However, we aren't going to use Redux. We're using our use context and create context. So anything now nested inside that wrap of store provider will be using this context. So how that's working is when we set is store updated, we're importing that from store context, but we have to go through the app to grab the store provider, which is passing all those things in. It's pretty cool how that works. So when we're in our home, we are gonna, right, I believe it has a default, our is store updated has a default value of true. And that's correct because we want it to be true. So once you load up this website for the first time, we can fetch the data and then set it to false. So now that that's there, we also need to do something interesting. We need to do if store is equal to undefined, then we need to return a div with waiting. And I believe we might not need to do this. We might also be able to do exclamation point store. When you have that in front, it should look for undefined, null, any falsy variables. So we'll hit save. And finally then, in our fetch data, we need to write a catch just in case there is an error. Oops, EROR, and then arrow function, and then we'll now do console error. Boom. All right. And then finally, we're going to set store, which it's going to be set to an array of objects where journals list is going to equal journals.journals. And that should be fine. Journals is not defined. Oops, that's because we need to call this journals. There we go. All right, so we're gonna hit refresh, bada boom, it's waiting. Let's check to see why it's waiting right now. Can't be found. There's an unexpected syntax error on home.js 9. Let's take a look here. All right, what else do we got? Uncaught in promise, cannot read properties of undefined. Let's just try giving it another. Let's just go back. We'll open it back up. We'll close it down, open it back up to localhost 3000. Just double check. Okay. So that's fine. We have some issues going on with the server. Let me go ahead and look into that real quick. All right, so I'm searching on Google, React proxy not hitting server port, right? And I identified that because we can see the get is trying to do localhost 3000 and our proxy should be 5000. And we can actually see the error message that we have in our app. This console.error is this lovely error message here. So yeah, I hopped on Google. Let's see what Stack Overflow has to say. This is the most accepted answer. Awesome. This person said actually just deleting the package lock and restarting worked for me. Why don't we give that a try? So we'll shut both of these down. We're going to right click on package lock. We'll click delete. Let's do npm I. That should reinstall and create a new package lock. So let's get our server up and running. I hit up twice, npm run dev start. All right, and going over here now, we'll do npm run start. Let's see if that worked. Do right click, console. It's still hitting the 3000, so we're gonna have to try something else. I mean, they did say delete package JSON and node modules, so let's give that a try. So we'll stop everything. So rm-r is going to be package lock, and you can just hit tab to finish that. And then node underscore modules, tab to finish that. We'll give that a shot. Yep, and that's pretty much what they had there as well. 0. It's gonna think for a little bit. It's obviously running this process in the back end. We can see our package lock JSON is already gone. And our node modules is still up here, so that should finish here. So I kind of got hung up on trying to delete node modules, so I'm gonna do rm-rf node modules and see if that works. I believe -rf is remove folder. Okay, so yeah, that worked. So let's close the terminal and run a new terminal. Now we'll do npm I, and that essentially should just do a clean install of all of the React packages and everything that we have here in our package JSON. So let's wait for that to finish. Okay, so we have the node modules and everything back. Let's do npm run dev start. We'll get our server spun up. All right, now npm run start is just our regular React app. Let's see what happens. Okay. All right, so yeah, this is fascinating. These are sometimes the things you have to look through. So yeah, what it's trying to hit 3000/test. All right, I am gonna dig in to figure it out more. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, even as a seasoned developer, sometimes you can get tunnel vision and be fallible. So the issue is we did not change our line 10 to be get journals. Kudos to you if you figured that out and were just like, Kevin, if you were screaming at me through the screen, my apologies, but I believe now that should work. Do a refresh there, look at that, there we go. So we can see now in our console, that's fine, test is not defined, that's on line 20 of our home. But yeah, so I'm so sorry for putting you all through that. We can get rid of that console log, but what we can do is actually do journals. So we're just gonna see what journals are printing out. I think we have to refresh, however. Bada boom. Okay, so these are the journal entries, and we can see in each one that we are in fact getting our MongoDB database connected and sending the journal entries that we created. So that is fantastic. And I believe we have 2 journal entries. I just want to double check on that. Journals. Yes, perfect. All right. I'm going to delete this one because I don't need it anymore. All right, it's dropping it. Cool. Wow, all right. So now that we have that there, let's just recap everything. So when the home pages hit, a use effect runs. If the isStore_updated is false, then we need to fetch data. Or if it's true, I'm sorry, we need to fetch data. And then we need to set isStore_updated to false. Yes, no, that's correct. While that's running, we expect our store to not be there. So we're going to just return a div of waiting. Once the store is good to go, then React will use the second return because it's essentially going to use effect. It's going to re-render stuff, which I don't know if that's the correct term, but it's essentially going to start over and hit the use effect again. Should be good there. So I apologize, that might have not been correct, but it'll run initially, the use effect will be hit, and then it'll run again. I believe the use effect won't run a second time actually, but it'll skip that because we have this empty array here. And then it will obviously have a defined store, so it will go to this return. Okay, so now that we have that there, in our journal entry square, we want to pass the information of the store into the journal entries. So for kicks, let's do store. I'm actually going to put that console log here. So now we can see what the store contains. And so the store is obviously an array of objects. On instance 0, we then have the journal lists, and that's going to contain another array of objects, but of all of our journal entries. So in our journal entry square, we're going to go ahead and create a property called list, and we're going to make it equal to store index 0 dot journal list, journals list, my apologies. And now that will pass these this array of objects into journal entry square as the list property. And so now when we go into journal entry square, we'll be able to go here, we'll deconstruct list, so now we can actually use it inside of our journal entries. We're gonna have to do some modification here though, because with our list, it's going to be multiple indexes. So we're going to need to actually loop through that list and output the squares based on how many things are in that list here, okay? So we're gonna do const, and let's call it journals display. Now that's going to equal a list.map, which is going to take in a journal. That's not going to take in, sorry, that's going to be what we're going to call the index we're currently in, and then it's going to take an index. Arrow function. So eventually, as you build this app, you're going to get more and more journal entries, okay? What we want to do is limit the amount of entries populated on the screen. I decided to limit it at 7. So we'll do if index is greater than 7, we're just going to return, okay? And let me just show you kind of what I'm talking about here. So if we go home, I'm going to comment, I'm going to hit Shift Alt down, down, down. I'm going to grab these last 3 by hitting Control D a couple times. And then I'm going to click, I'm going to comment this out by hitting Control /. I'm going to hit Shift Alt down and just make a few more journal entry squares. Okay, so this is what that looks like. Now, what happens, a couple things are gonna be overwhelming to just the average user, right? We always want to think of the user and how they would want to use this. Me being the user because I created it, I didn't want a laundry list of all my journal entries, right? I kind of just wanted my most recent 7 entries. How this currently works, and I'll show you this when we get there, but because we're grabbing them in the order that they are in the database, we're going to see here that this was created before this was created. So this is going to be index 0, index 1. And that's how they're going to be passed in to the website. So this will be index 0, this will be index 1, index 2, index 3. So our oldest entry, as we are right now, will be here. I'll demonstrate that to you in a little bit, but that is why I have a limit of 7, so it can just be a little bit more readable. So now we're back to 1. We'll go here to our journal entry square. We'll limit it to 7. Now we're going to do const tags equals our journal dot tags dot map. Okay. So we don't get too far ahead of you, we're destructuring list. So this list is essentially now equal to an array at this moment of 2 objects. Okay. It's equal to journals list, which is an array of 2 objects. We're doing a map function on that list. So this journal, right, this is the identifier name of whichever index it's in at that moment. So on its first go round, it will be the index of 0, which contains this object, right? So the index of 0 is an object. That is why journal, which is the index of 0, is going to be journal.tags. So journal.tags now contains an array of our tag strings. So now we want to map through that, and we want to have that first index be called tag, and we're going to return a list item that's going to have a class name of tag-item. It's going to have a key, which is going to be backticks, $, curly brackets, index, dash, curly bracket, or $, curly brackets, tag. Obviously, that's fine. That's an error because I didn't delete that. So inside that list item, we are going to display the string. Okay. So just to recap, we're inside list, which is this array of objects. And the first index, we are targeting the tags key, which contains an array of strings. We're going to loop through that and output each individual string as a list item. Okay. So what we're going to be able to do here is we're actually going to need to move this return statement up. And we're going to move it just up 1 level. And how I did that, I did Alt up, right? Alt up, yes. Highlight it, Alt up. And because that's what's happening, we can now put tags there, save it, and there is an error Let's see what the error could possibly be. That is why, because we now need to return journals display. Okay, because before we had this return statement, now we are doing a return inside journals display, and so we need to now return that variable. Oops, yes, my bad. We need to wrap the word tags in curly brackets. And now we can see test1 and test2 is printing out. And that is perfect. That's exactly what we want. And obviously we're getting this key error because, right, they both have the same string names. So I don't think that's super important right now. But this is awesome. Guys, this is why I get excited, because we've now connected our project to a database. We've stored information in the database. We're retrieving it and populating it live. Like, this is so cool. This is when you start to really get to a level of development where if you have an idea in your mind of something you want to create, you can actually create it. Like, it's amazing. I absolutely love it. So let's move forward. We can do very similar things here. So with our title, we can actually do, in curly brackets, journal.title. All right, and when we go back here, it's test. I don't know if it was before, but we can do create date. We can actually output, we need to actually do some quick formatting. We can see how it looks, but we'll do journal.created. Okay, and created, I'm in our server.js file right now. Created is the key in our database collection that stores the date. So we hit save, and now we can actually see the created date. Like, this is so cool. We need to actually modify this a little bit, because obviously that string is pretty difficult for humans to interpret. So we'll do const date equals moment. And I don't remember if we've installed moment. It doesn't look like we have. So let's open up a new terminal here. We'll do npm I moment. It's gonna go ahead and install that real quick. Bada boom, perfect. I'm gonna close that terminal screen now. And up here, I'm gonna do import moment from moment. Boom, there we go. All right. And essentially that's just gonna allow us to output a date in just a little bit more readable of a format. So journal.created.format. And I did journal.created, and then outside the parentheses, I did .format. And we're gonna do here, we're gonna do MMMDOYYYY. And essentially that's gonna be month, day, year. Let me get a semicolon on that. But now if we hit refresh, it's waiting, it's thinking. Uh-oh. It's just thinking, there we go. Okay, so we now need to put the date down here. Once we do that, there we go, October 8th, 2022. That's a good timestamp. That's when this video is being made. So yeah, guys, this is, I love this. I really enjoy this. The final thing we want to do is in our body, we want to do, oops, I got too close there. We'll do journal.body.substring, which is substr. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to truncate our body for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it might be just too darn long, and we don't want a crazy long string being produced. And oops, what's going on here? I need closing brackets. There we go. Oh, I don't know. I have a parentheses there. Boom. I guess I'll show you it without it. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that. Our journal body now should have like, yeah, there we go. There it is. So, right, obviously sometimes your journal entries are gonna be much longer than this, and we don't wanna mess too much with the formatting, because what we'll build is when you click on it, it'll actually open up a new page where you can see your entire journal entry. So I'm gonna add that back in, and I'll actually truncate it to 10 characters. So substring says, okay, start at which index, end at which index, like truncate at which index. And then plus is a concatenation symbol for this. So if we truncate it at 10, then we can add an ellipses to the end of it. So let's see what that looks like. Boom. So this is a nice way to be able to truncate your journal entries. You can see, oh, cool, that's a little bit of what it's about. And then when you click it, it'll open it up to a new page we have yet to build, and you'll be able to see your full journal entry. But I've tested that 200 seems to be a good character limit for that. This is obviously not 200 characters long, but it just added it to the end of it anyways, so we're fine. But guys, this is a really sweet thing. We've officially now got our create page. We're gonna, in the next video, hook up this button to actually create things. But on our home page, and you saw, by the way, I'm actually gonna show you just real quick on our home page, if we don't have this if is store updated method, I'm gonna hit Alt up arrow just to show you guys, and I'm gonna go ahead and comment this out. If I save it, if we go to the create page and we go back to the home page, let me just refresh, bada boom, create, home, create, search, home. Oh, well, I'm gonna have to eat my foot on that one. I thought it was gonna do something different. Which it makes sense because we haven't created anything yet. So like, let's say you create something, right? When we go home, we want to be able to run that command again. And right now it is it running the command? Goodness gracious, it might be running the command. Let's see. Throw that to the side there. Let me clear it, create, home. Yeah, okay. So this is what I want to avoid. It's making, yep, you just saw it. It's just making so many calls to our database every time because we just have our fetch data being called every time. And so this is some of the stuff that's printing out as it's connecting to our database, which is awesome to see. But again, time is money and connections is money. If no changes have been made, we don't want every time we navigate to the home page to be another API call to our database, right? So having this check to see if is store updated true or not will allow us to not have a constant call to our server. And we actually need to rebuild our React project because it errored out, right? There was just way too many calls going on. So now it's going to go ahead and it's starting a development server. We can see, boom, it's waiting. We're waiting for our call to happen. Okay, and this is another kind of issue. When we're working on a free tier of MongoDB, it's going to limit how many calls you can make to the server in a certain amount of time. So I actually need to wait out the timeout because I can't connect to the server right now, which is obviously throwing all sorts of issues with our application, okay? So with that, I'm going to end this video, and we'll see you in the next one where we move forward on our project.